Hoppy April, everybody. Spring has sprung, and with it comes a bountiful basket of brand new video games to give you a good excuse to stay inside and avoid all that pollen. Here are April 2025's biggest game releases. Before we get started, just our usual caveat that we do our best to be as informative and comprehensive as humanly possible, but things do slip through the cracks here and there, and occasionally we make mistakes. However, this month we are being even more comprehensive than usual and double dipping on some of the games that are coming out, specifically the little old indies. So if you'd like a slightly deeper dive on some of the weirder, more offbeat games mentioned this month, keep an eye out for that video as well. And now, without further ado, the games. On April 1st, you can go hog wild with Nif Nif, a colorful deck builder roguelike that's about an adorable piglet. That's on Switch and PC. Meanwhile, if you're more into canines than swines, Koira is a cute hand-drawn puzzle adventure co-starring a puppy. That's on PS5 and PC. On April 2nd, Steel Hunters hits PC. That's a free-to-play PvPvE multiplayer game featuring some nice big old clunky chunky giant robots courtesy of Wargaming, so it's basically World of Mechs, except it's not because that's the title of a completely unrelated VR game with no official connection to Wargaming as far as I can tell. If you enjoy pointing and also clicking on things, there's Elroy and the Aliens on PC, a nice colorful throwback adventure game. It's not a game, but a friendly reminder that April 2nd is when Nintendo's big Switch 2 Direct is happening, and we'll likely get a whole bunch of reveals and announcements that day, so mark your calendars and set your alarms because that's happening at 6 a.m. Pacific.
Add some play to the start of your day.
On April 3rd, The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered comes to PC, and hopefully it is either a more solid port than Part 1 was, or it's as entertainingly buggy. The last one had the issue where characters would randomly be soaking wet in cutscenes, and they just look like that one Jordan Peele gif. Also on PC that day is Sand, a PvPvE extraction shooter that has players roaming around a giant open world on huge steampunk robot spiders, so kinda like Sea of Thieves meets Wild Wild West, but with a dash of Mortal Engines thrown in. Seems cool. Still on PC, still April 3rd, is Roman Triumph Survival City Builder, which makes my job a lot easier by having a mostly self-explanatory title, but if the thrill of building Rome in a day wasn't enough to grab you, there's also some dragons. On April 4th, Ekoh Beach hits PC, which looks a little like Stardew Valley wearing a backwards hat and sunglasses, if that makes sense, and it'll have you collecting resources to rebuild a town that recently had to deal with a robot uprising. The Renovator Origins might sound like it involves fixing things up, but it is actually a first-person psychological horror game where you are trapped in some sort of nightmarish art museum. That came to PC last year, and on April 4th, it is on basically everything else. On April 7th, PC players get Peppered, an existential platformer which looks kooky and colorful enough as is, but apparently the hook here is that you only have one shot to do everything, and if you screw it up, it affects a branching storyline. On April 8th, Xbox Series and PC gets South of Midnight, the Southern Gothic fantasy action adventure from Compulsion Games, the studio that was behind We Happy Few, which features some really killer visuals, in part thanks to a big talking catfish. Not enough games have big talking catfish, so I'm glad that this one does. Do you believe love can bloom on the battlefield? Well, if so, you may enjoy Battlefield Waltz, or you may hate it. I don't know what you're interested in, but however you feel, it is a visual novel otome game that involves a talking sword, but also a bunch of very pretty anime boys who I assume can also talk. That's on Switch. One of my favorite things about video games is that they're basically tiny pocket universes, which is also what I always loved about miniature playsets as a kid, and what I love about building dioramas as an adult, and Tiny Garden looks to combine all the above with some cute little virtual Polly Pocket-esque microcosms for you to futz around in. That's on PC. On April 9th, All in Abyss Judge the Fate combines gambling and witchcraft and anime ladies, and you can explain that to your mom when she walks in on you playing it on PS5, Switch, or PC. That same day, Commandos Origins brings little tiny gritty World War II real-time tactics to PS5, Xbox Series, and PC, and if you'd rather just drive a little tiny car around and blow up a bunch of little tiny Driveloop Survivors will let you do exactly that on PC. If you'd like to make a bunch of regular-sized people go down some really big mountains on snowboards and mountain boards, which are like snowboards with wheels or skateboards with big bindings, you can do all of that in Descenders Next on PC and all the Xboxes. Monster Energy Supercross 25 is the latest installment in the soft drink branded dirt bike series, and it's shaking things up this year with a switch to Unreal 5, which promises improved physics and dynamic track evolution. Hopefully the developers stick the landing, otherwise that monstrously energetic fan base might be Supercross. That's on PS5, Xbox Series, and PC, April 10th. Still on April 10th, Promise Mascot Agency promises an agency of mascots that you'll be able to manage in this quirky game that follows an ex-Yakuza living in small-town Japan who just so happens to be voiced by one Takaya Kuroda, who's previously voiced an ex-Yakuza living in small-town Japan in such hit games as Yakuza 3 and Yakuza 6, The Song of Life, as well as the rest of the Yakuza games that Kiryu shows up in, which is basically all of them. That's on everything. If you like first-person brain benders, you've got some options. There's the Blueprints, the procedurally generated architectural strategy puzzle adventure, which I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around, but which has some very good buzz. And then there's the Talos Principle Reawakened, the full remake of the incredibly smart 2014 philosophical puzzle game, which is somehow from the same developer as the Dumb as Rocks Serious Sam games. In any case, you can feel like a real brain genius when both of those puzzly games come to new gen and PC. Also on April 10th, there's Star Overdrive on Switch, an open-world adventure about zipping around on a hoverboard, which is really all you have to say to get my attention because hoverboards are awesome.
He's on a hoverboard!
Meanwhile, Willow Guard is a story-driven RPG that clearly takes some inspiration from The Wind in the Willows and Redwall. That's on PC. On April 11th, you can save a few big bucks you would have pumped into the arcade game at your local dive bar by hunting big bucks at home when Big Buck Hunter Ultimate Trophy comes to PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. That features 27 treks and 135 hunting sites from the arcade game series, and while it might not be an accurate portrayal of hunting, it is an accurate portrayal of what Ted Nugent sees when he closes his eyes.
Hey, how you guys doing? Anybody without a gun and a knife and a handkerchief and a chapstick, get the out of here.
If you prefer scuba diving to dive bars and would rather be on the receiving end of a hellish barrage of projectiles, on April 15th there is Dive the Depths on PC, a self-contained underwater action roguelike apparatus. Also on the 15th is Lost Records Bloom and Rage Tape 2, the second half of the supernatural coming-of-age adventure from the Life is Strange folks. Considering that both records and tapes have two sides, maybe they could have called this like Side A and Side B, or Side 1 and Side 2 if they had to be a little more clear about which came first. But for all I know, maybe that was the plan originally, and then somebody decided to dumb it down even further because realistically there's a large chunk of the gaming demographic that's probably not super well versed in old analog media, and ultimately I am being an annoying pedantic pain in the ass, so ignore me. That's on PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. April 17th has a big pile of games dropping. The 2.5D Souls-like Metroidvania Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree is on new gen, Switch, and PC. The side-scrolling beat-em-up Phantom Breaker Battlegrounds Ultimate and the adorable Metroidvania Rusty Rabbit are on Switch, PS5, and PC, and the Wizard School Builder Wizdom Academy and the physics-based puzzle platformer Bionic Bay hit PC, and if you'd like to know more, check out that indie games video that I mentioned earlier. On April 18th, the Lunar Remastered Collection gives the Sega Saturn cult classics Lunar, Silver Star Story, and Lunar 2 Eternal Blue fresh modern makeovers complete with a newly recorded English dub as well as the classic Japanese language track, and if you prefer the classic look to the new 2D animation, that is still an option that's coming to everything. April 22nd, Switch and PC get Maliki, Poison of the Past, a tactical RPG based on the French webcomic that involves time-space colonizing plant life. April 24th brings with it another big dumb pile of video games. If you like urban ass-kicking, there is Fatal Fury, City of the Wolves on the PlayStation, Series X, and PC. That is the first new entry in SNK's deadliest and angriest fighting game series in literally a quarter of a century, but you probably recognize a few of the characters who've popped up in other brawlers since then, like Mai Shiranui and Terry Bogard. If you'd rather some relaxing rural resource management, Sunseed Island makes farming charming on all the consoles. If you want some stylish tactical strategy anime adventures, the 100-line Last Defense Academy is the first-time collaboration from two of the main guys behind the Zero Escape and Danganronpa games. That's on Switch and PC. If you want some more conventional strategy, Tempest Rising is a brand new RTS that is paying homage to some classics of the genre from the late 90s and early 2000s, namely Command & Conquer. That's on PC. Still on the 24th, there's also Clair Obscure Expedition 33, a turn-based RPG, but one that's apparently got a pretty novel real-time combat mechanic, and I've heard some folks say it reminds them of Final Fantasy VIII. That's on new gen and PC. Still that day is Yasha Legends of the Demon Blade, which is a colorful action RPG with roguelike elements set in a heavily fantasticized reinterpretation of Japan's Edo period. That is on both PlayStations, the newer Xboxes, Switch, and PC. We have this running joke that Sony's Horizon games are cursed to open against other massive releases. Horizon Zero Dawn came out the same week as Breath of the Wild, Horizon Forbidden West came out a week before Elden Ring, and even the Horizon Zero Dawn Remaster had to share a release date with Dragon Age The Veilguard. On April 25th, the Horizon curse happens in reverse when a big huge first-party open-world PlayStation game, namely Days Gone Remastered, has to share a release date with someone else's Horizon game, namely the PS5 release of the formerly Xbox exclusive Forza Horizon 5. Okay, so technically Forza Horizon 5 is only out on the 25th for people who pre-ordered the premium edition, and everyone else has to wait until the 29th. Don't even get me started on how little sense it makes to pay extra for early access to a game that's been out since 2021 on other platforms, but regardless, Forza Horizon 5 includes the Hot Wheels and Rally expansions from the base game, and while it will have cross-play, it won't have cross-progression, which is kind of a pain in the ass when you've pumped 130 hours into it, like some people. Still, this game rules, you should play it. If a big happy tropical race car vacation in Mexico isn't your jam and you'd rather a nice depressing motorcycle trip through a zombie apocalypse in the Pacific Northwest in search of your probably dead wife, I'd bet Days Gone Remastered is more your speed. In addition to overhauled graphics, it's also got some new features like accessibility options that should make it easier for some folks, but also permadeath, speedrun, and horde modes to make it a lot harder for other folks. That's on PS5 and also on PC. Oh, and sorry, quick retraction earlier. I said this was a zombie apocalypse. Those are not zombies, those are freakers, which are like zombies, but cooler. Almost as cool as wearing a backwards hat to your own wedding.
Well, traditionally
If I married a guy who wore a backwards hat to his own wedding, I would probably disappear from that relationship as well. I'm just gonna throw that out there. If you want a game that involves colorful car customization, but also a nice grimy post-apocalypse, Badlands Crew is out on the 28th for PC, and it's kind of all the above, I guess. If you'd like a game that involves big, loud, fast motorcycles but isn't sponsored by Monster Energy or infested with hordes of actual monsters, MotoGP 25 comes to everything on the 30th. If you'd like a game that's infested with hordes of monsters and there are no motorcycles in sight, there's the dungeon-crawling ARPG Conquest Dark, and if that's not weird enough for you, Skin Deep is a sneaky-looking, non-linear first-person shooter that may or may not involve getting pointy stuff stuck in your feet if you don't watch your step because you're not wearing any shoes. Those are both on PC on the 30th. In case Promise Mascot Agency didn't give you enough quirky small-town misadventures featuring an ex-Yakuza, at some point in April, Dave the Diver is getting its crossover DLC, Ichiban's Holiday, which features Ichiban Kasuga of Like a Dragon fame. That's coming to everything that Dave the Diver is currently on. And there you have it, April's biggest game releases. Remember, if you want to stay up to date with upcoming games or just keep track of what you're currently playing or want to play or did play or hated or whatever, go check out IGN Playlist. It's like Goodreads or Letterboxd, but for video games. As always, huge thanks to Amanda Medina, Chris Del Padre, and Logan Plant for making this video possible, and a huge thank you to all of you for watching. Hop in the comments and let me know if we forgot anything or if you're stoked for any of this month's games. And if you want a closer look at a few of the more offbeat ones I mentioned, go check out this month's Indie Game Roundup. We'll drop a link in the description below. I will see you back here in May, or wherever. If I see you at the store, say hello. Have a good one, everybody.